we love to bring new MMFMers into the fold, starting with our new friend, Gustavo Ferrada. Then I became the head of film at TV, Spanish public broadcaster. So I was the head of the team that decided what movies were to be financed by Spanish public TV. And there was something that took some 3 years, and then I became an independent producer. I've been an independent producer for over 11 years in my new company. I've been producing feature films, live action, and a couple of animated movies, which we can talk about, but it's going to be very simple. I mean, it won't take long for me to explain what it takes to make it takes hell. And that's funny. So from there, how it came, life changed. It was like dinosaurs were, there was this meteorites, you say in English, or the meteorite coming called COVID and internet, and all of a sudden life changed and there was no sun. And that's that we pretended this sunny, not. So that changed, and I got this proposal to work as the head of the scripted in a company called Mediacrest, which is a new company that we're trying to build up. We are working very well on entertainment. We have a couple of shows in Spain that do very well. And I'm unscripted, and we have nothing yet produced. But this very last week, we started recording our first TV series for the Spanish public broadcaster. So I'm really happy to say that finally we're a producer.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Gustavo. All righty, so we're going to jump to the middle, to our good friend Joe Menendez. We did a great chat with you last year, which was very fun, getting to know who you are and welcoming you back to Miami as well. So, but speaking of Miami, we weren't going to show reels today. We did that last year, but we did have a little clip that I wanted to start with to take us a little bit farther back in your history with the great city of Miami. So I wanna play this for you guys, which is super dope.
I don't know if this is super dope.
It's super dope. Trust me.
I guess this is origin.
Yeah, this is an origin story. This is like Walt before Mickey. We have Joe Menendez before LA.
This is super dope.
All right, give that a round of applause.
That was just a show. Fast forward from that, I'm a director producer. I've directed Star Trek, Snowpiercer. I was a producing director on Kung Fu and a show called Siren. I did a show called Evil for Paramount Plus as well just recently, and then went on strike. So the journey from that guy to the guy doing Star Trek has been 30 years, and it's all been an emphasis on craft and wanting to be better and never being satisfied and wanting to, frankly, want to go to LA and want to be somebody that can play with the big boys. And that was always my thought. So whenever things that I did, and I did a lot of things, because right now it's easy to say, he's doing stuff for Paramount, he's doing something for Warner Brothers. But there was a long time that things got rejected, that things didn't work. And so for me, it was always analyzing why things didn't work, and breaking down my own work so that I can get better, I can get undeniable. And there's a point, I'm going to say 15 years ago, where it just clicked. And suddenly, one job begets another job, and then it just snowballs. And it seems sort of, looking at that going, how did that guy become the guy that was directing Patrick Stewart or doing all these things? And I think it's because I've never thought of myself as like, this is amazing and wonderful. I've always thought of myself as a student, and I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly wanting to get better. So, I've been very fortunate, but it's also been a lot of hard work in the sense that I'm constantly trying to figure out how to get better. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I think as we go on in this talk today, that's sort of because these two guys are going to be the guys that are the adults. For me, it's going to be how filmmakers then go to these guys, and then because I think there's a way of and I'm not going to jump into your questions, right? That I've because I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's a lot of emphasis on the market, which is great, and about where things are and where things are shooting, and that's amazing. But I think as filmmakers, I think we have to be prepared for opportunities, because sometimes opportunities are there, and there are opportunities. They're all over the world. There are opportunities everywhere. The question then is, when these opportunities present themselves to you, are you going to be ready? Because I've seen it on my own shows, on Kung Fu, where directors are coming, they've been given these amazing opportunities to come in, and they blow it. And their careers are over before it starts. And so, you go from, I've seen directors go from, it's bliss and it's amazing and they've got this opportunity. And my job as a directing producer is to supervise them and make sure that they succeed. And despite all efforts, sometimes they don't. And it comes down to just not being prepared and not being ready for those opportunities. So that's sort of where my emphasis on this talk, I think, is how do we then make ourselves ready so when these guys call, you're ready.
No, that's a great point, because oftentimes we say of producers is that they're always ahead of the train, right? Once that film is greenlit and you're in production, that train has left the station, and the producers are the one that have to deal with everything to make sure that you make it to your destination.
Yeah. And now with this movie that I'm doing now after the strike, which is another thing that I guess we should talk about at some point.
Sure. Mention it.
Here's the thing. It's now, as a producer on this movie as well as a director, I'm now driving the locomotive. Right. I'm now the guy driving the train. So it's like, on top of being a director, it's also being a producer and doing what you're saying, where you have to drive the train. And it's a constant sort of balance between, I want to give opportunities, but you also want to make the movie, right? You want the movie to be successful. So it's this balance that we're all looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk to our good friend from the UK, our local train conductor over there. Yeah, that's your new title, from executive producer to train conductor. Welcome back, Stewart. First of all, Stewart, just jump in there. Tell us, remind some of the folks, a lot of new attendees as well this year. So thanks for all the new folks that are joining us. A little bit about yourself and your background, and what your work as a producer means to you.
It's really like friends and colleagues who are talking about how to get into industry. My journey into industry is of little interest to anyone, I think. But I started at school where I left school and I couldn't pass an exam, and but wanted to be an artist. And as my mother, was from an ordinary family in Scotland. My mother came home one day and a neighbour had got a job as an artist. And I said, well, what kind of artist? She said, he's a lithographic artist. And I asked my mum what that meant. She said, well, I don't know, but he's an artist. So it was arranged that I became an apprentice. So I served, and what it was basically, we were in the print industry, we were a designer. And there was a series of steps. I got a scholarship to an art school, and then I went to did one degree, then did a degree in London, the Royal College, which is just it was free. It was an extraordinary place. And there, this would be in the 60s, I could draw. And so I drew for so many different magazines around the world, made lots of money, could draw for, you would know in the States, do work regularly for the Sunday Times to illustrate stories. But what became more frustrating to me is that I would read the novel or I'd read the article, I would do the drawing, but I was more and more interested in the literature. So I was drawn into storytelling. And in the last year of college, in Royal College, I moved from painting school into the film school and learned the basics there of storytelling. So I was initially thinking, well, be a director, you kind of have control over the story. But the frustration I had as a director is it was a string of dramas, movies, initially documentary, then movies, was that it took such a long time to make, and you had to deal with hundreds of very kind of eccentric geniuses, assemble them all and point them in the right direction. And it would take you, the films then would take me about maybe a year and a half from developing the story, writing the story, directing it, getting it made. Then I was working on movies for cinema, but not on television. Which leads me to what I was keen to talk about today, which is that when you made a film in the UK, you would pitch this. There was no pitch document. There was no showreel. There was no. It was just an idea. You might have a book. You might have a story. You might have some photographs, and you would sit in a room with a friend who was a storyteller, and you would pitch the story, and they would say, "Have a go, Stewart. Here's some money. Develop the script," and they would fully fund the movie. So then you could make a film. This would be in the 70s and 80s. So the tariff was maybe around £600,000. But if it cost more, they would give you more. You didn't have to be. You weren't concerned with the budget. There was a budget. There were constraints. But you developed and made the story that you wanted to make. And since then, as I've gone on this journey, it's as you talk about, you learn the process of making. It was like a long, long apprenticeship where you learn to respect the team of people who make these shows, these extraordinary talented people here, from costume design to sound design to buildings, and it's a kind of privilege. You travel the world, you get to go places that no one else gets to see you work with. Some crazy people, and mostly they're not. It's decent, clever people. But what drove me, and which always surprised me about the industry, is that the thing that drove me was that you tell stories that you want to tell. You have to relate this to money. Someone can want to watch. But if you balance this, if you think there is an audience for this story, I can bring something to that story. So more and more, my job is to be working with writers. So I've become more of a writer, producer. I'm developing a story where you find a story, and that story feeds itself. It demands a set of kind of ideas which come from the people that your past experience and the characters that you've chosen to write about. And maybe it must be about 8 years ago, I went to Edinburgh to meet. I was introduced to the man who wrote the Wire, Dave Simon. And I was blown away by this. He was a man I don't know if people, I'm sure you do it. He was a journalist and working for the local newspaper. And he was approached by the parents of this young girl she was a prostitute in the town. She'd been killed, and the police did nothing about this young woman. And he wrote this piece saying he was horrified that there was no, if you're working in the streets like this young girl, she was a daughter of a family. She had a home. She'd lost her way, and she was in trouble. But he wrote this article, and the police chief rang him and said, "Come and spend some time the reality of this of running a police force in a city." So he spent a year in Baltimore, writing, developing, and this idea. He took it to, I think, one of the greatest producers in the world, who's been moved to his shop about but a senior figure in HBO who had made, in my view, the very best drama in the last 30 years. And I worked with this man, had the privilege of working with him. So David and this exec, he talked about the story. And if you go online, it's, for me, really important to read this pitch document. He wrote, it is no gloss to it. It's got lots of changes and scribbles. But what he talks about is, on one level, the story is a genre piece. It's a thriller set in the city on crime and surveillance. But another, it's an existential view of America's society today. And so I'm in the UK watching a drama about a group of cops in a city I've never been to, but really understanding, without seeing the pitch, without speaking to David, really understanding what this story was saying, telling us. Life in a city is so complex. There's good people, there's bad people. There's a society, there's civilization. People are killing each other. You have prostitution, criminality. People move from the good to the bad, and the bad to the good. And this man had captured this by spending a year inside that world. But what was for me was so wonderful is that the the world itself embraced this drama. It became, it's a classic in television. And there are many like this. Other people in the room will know, well, if, you will have seen a movie that really touches your life and you remember it. You maybe have grief in your home and you'll turn to that movie. We all have them, they're kind of symbols, they're moments in life that encapsulate our kind of hidden lives. So here are these great dramas, and then I, as I've got older, I kind of, you had a lot to do with, and it's not surprising. It's the next way of invention is that as you get older, you survive, walk back, and learn more about human beings, and you learn about yourself and the business itself. By delivering show after show, you're trusted. And when you pitch the stories to somebody who was shit, and then they keep it worth $100 million, they've got to trust people who are with me this much. And so it's hardly to do with tenacity. It's even harder to do with good things. Yeah. All this intrigue you found is, I'm finally about the kind of satanic game. It is like. So I didn't expect that what was this, but I wanted to talk. My plan had been for this discussion was to go through 3 projects I worked on, and I won't go through them in detail, but it kind of to sketch through them. The first was a single movie that it came from me. It was a friend of mine. It had a child who was taken into a hospital called Great Ormond Street. It's a National Health Service run, so it's run by the government. But it also is a charity which raises around $100 million a year. How does a hospital raise this money? They have the rights to a book which you all have heard of called Peter Pan. And when the hospital was first set up as before the National Health Service, the man who wrote Peter Pan, who'd lost his brother in a skating accident, and whose mother could never come to terms with the loss of her son, muddled up the son, Jan Barrett, grew up and created this story for his mother as a kind of grieving tool. That his son, his brother, her son who died, was alive and never died. And he gave the rights to this book when he died to the hospital. And the hospital itself, as I say, they licensed it to Disney, who licensed it for plays, and this money pours in, and this money is used to bring kids from all around the world to treat them and cure them. I mean, it's just one of these extraordinary places. So I thought, when this friend went and I was told this story about Jane Barry, I thought, why don't I make a story about Peter Pan, do a version of Peter Pan, with the children who go to Neverland are the children in the hospital. So I then thought, making single films these days, it's just a nightmare. I tell you, as a producer, make movies in Europe, and I won't go into the kind of economy of it, but it just doesn't make sense. But commercially, it don't make sense. Unless you make a tentpole movie, you can't make it. Anyway, the upshot for this film is I took it to television. Why I want us to give you this as an illustration is that I know that certainly in Europe, you want to make a single film for television. It's extremely rare that a broadcaster will put a single film on. They won't put the money in, and there's a reason for it. There's a commercial logic to it. But if you make a single film for an event, I made this for Christmas, there's a guaranteed audience because no one's going to go watching telly. So I knew if I had this heart, kind of moving story set at Christmas, I would have an audience. That was one box it would take. And the other would have a long shelf life, which would interest the broadcaster. Every 2 or 3 Christmases, they can show this film. So, but the other aspect of television, it will only fund up to a set tariff. There's a value on an hour of television. So that's X. But the budgets keep rising. So the X that the broadcaster will pay you, albeit they want it, and they don't want very many of these, they will pay, let's say in UK, $1 million an hour for a single drama, so $1.5 million film. And they're basically buying a license fee. Now, unless that film has a global reach, has an international market, there's no one's going to put the money up because it has no sale value. If, however, a film like Peter the Version of Peter Pan has a potential international sale value, I was able to then raise some private capital investment. I moved to I mentioned you, this was a country in Europe that offers a tax break, really substantial tax break, built in the studio in this time, and some pre-sales. So I was able to fund the film, which from a television point of view costs, say, £1.5 million. I was able to raise around £5 million from different sources. And the third element in this, it won the Emmy, this film. And as soon as you have a prize like this, and if you seek these prizes for some effort to market these films, then the sale price of that show really escalates. So it's just a window. If you take this one example, any producer here could sit and tell you about the film. It's either for domestic market or it's for the domestic market with a sale market.
I kind of wanted you to jump in, though, Gustavo, because I think he put a lot of interesting points in terms of the development process and sort of how he works as a producer in the UK, but I think considering an international audience. Would you say, Gustavo, that that's part of the work you do at Mediacrest? Are you producing things for a local Spanish audience, or are you thinking globally and internationally in terms of the content and its value in the marketplace?
How much time do you have?
We're good.
Tell me. Okay. That question could take 2 hours to answer. Okay, so I'm going to go. Basically, what we're saying, we look for, we used to have 2 markets, a local market and the international. But all of a sudden, something has happened, and the Latin American market seems to be open for us. These buyers, which is something weird, because we're not Latin American, but we share the language. We're not Latin American, but we share a lot of things together, and we can approach stories in a way that is not Latin American, but that can make sense of Latin America. And again, we are a weird country because we are on the other side of the Atlantic, but we can relate to Latin American stories in a very, very easy way. So why don't we do that? Why don't we cross the bridge there? And so this is something that we're trying to work on for the past 2 or 3 years, not before, but good. I mean, it's not something to be proud of. To be ashamed not to have done this before. So it's not so much. Yeah, we have 3 different markets. The local market, you have projects that are clearly local. And when you say local, it doesn't mean they're worse. But the scope is not that big, but that may have interest there. Then you have the international market. The international market has more levels, but it has 2 different, very, very different levels. One is we do it in English with British English-speaking talent, or you do it in Spanish, French, Italian, whatever. So there is a big gap between the two potential markets in the international. So, of course, for us, it's easier try and bridge the Spanish language international market. That's a hard one because it's not a market it's there waiting for product. It's a market that you sort of create every time you have to go into the market because you have to bring a project that really appeals to those territories. Okay, we reduced back, well, younger. I'm young though. Younger, I mean. We produced this director who's an auteur, it's called Julio Medem. He's done some beautiful movies. He's taking up, and he hasn't done movies for some time now. And we, when I worked with him in a couple of movies, he's not the kind of director that you would consider a commercial director, an entertainer, or whatever, the kind of movies that you would expect to go mainstream on movies. But for us, he was one of our top commercial meaning that you would sell his movies right, not because he had huge audiences everywhere, but we did have the opportunity to create little audiences all over the world. So some people in Japan were waiting for his movie. Some people in France were waiting for his movie. Some people in Germany were waiting. So we could sell his movies very well on a lower scale, but scale that would make sense commercially for us. So this is not so much about what's commercial. For me, commercial is what you can sell. Where do you sell it? Well, you have to look for let's look for your clients or your audiences, and how you reach them. You need distributors, you need the middleman. So you have to make sure that those middlemen understand what you want to do and understand their audiences, because if they understand the audiences and you understand the way they work, and you can work internationally in this lower scale. And then, I mean, sometime in life, it's quite good. This is a movie. This is a business which, where, you know, as for police, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you lose. How do you win? The time you win is the time you have the opportunity to play on that higher level, on that scale. And there's this other example. Sorry, this is Harry. We have to run the good. The hair in here. There was this movie called The Others. I don't know if you've seen it, Billy Goldman. That's a Spanish movie, 100% Spanish, that we produced together with Luis Guarda, who is a big director and producer at that time. Alejandro Mann was the director. That was originally a movie to be shot in Spain, in an island in Chile, of a story that was supposed to be, the main character was going to be played by one of the top Spanish actresses at the time. But suddenly, there's this other movie called Open Your Eyes that Tom Cruise falls in love with the story. He buys the rights to produce the remake, produce it, called Vanilla in the Sky. And he fell in love with the story. He kept calling, I'd seen your movie for the fifth time tonight. I want to be part of your next movie. And the next movie was about this lady and the two kids, so there was no room for Tom Cruise. When we talked to him about the movie, tell me, my boss, he would produce The Others, I would produce The Others movies. He left the script and he said, oh, this is a present from a wife. His wife was Nicole Kidman, but that Nicole Kidman, oh, wait, there's no way. I mean, Nicole Kidman, I mean, you have this image of the people. So it's like, it doesn't make sense to have Nicole Kidman. She came, she worked with the director, and then all of a sudden, that it's her. I mean, she is that mother. So we produce it with Tom Cruise. And as when Tom Cruise said, I want to be executive producer here, Weinstein Company came. So we escalated in, and what was going to be let's say a $2.5 million, $3 million movie became, a lot more. But you got the chance to play in that other, in which you can make $100 million international box office, which is something that if we add all the international box office of all of our movies, I mean, the 25, 30 movies, I don't know, if we add all the international box office of all the other movies, it won't even get close to what we did with that one. So when we approach international, you have to know what your scale, what kind of scale your product has, and where you have to go and find your distributors, which are your first clients, and you find your clients. It's key because everybody talks about who's going to watch the movie. I don't know, it's very important. But I care who's going to buy my movie to put it for them. But that's the one I want to approach first, because if I go straight to the last one, then there's no way I can do it. That's what the platforms have done. I mean, they bought the audiences for them. And so now there's no distributor. You go to that, but this is a different story, and I'll get into that. So, and in between, all of a sudden, we are Spanish, and the Latin American market has become a market. each territory is different. You cannot talk Argentina, Mexico, Colombia the same, but there are stories that can travel very, very well. They can relate us all in a way that makes sense, and that it sometimes escalate into this idea. I'm not talking money heist, which is something that's happened. I mean, you cannot build a business on exceptions. What happens? I mean, it's not about I'm gonna be able to win the lottery every year. No, it doesn't happen. I mean, if that happens, you sit down, relax, and enjoy. Oh, you have to work on the other ones, and the other ones are the ones that we can try to find partners in Latin America in order to further develop this upcoming market, which is still. But it's not going to work in Argentina. In Colombia, we can. In Peru, we don't have. Okay, let's work together and see what we can find. Because if we're able to create this middle market between domestic and the being international English-speaking market, then we'll have opportunities to make something different, something ours.
No, that's a great point. Thank you, Gustavo. And Joe Menendez. So, I think there's a lot of things there that you could probably feed off of. And obviously, we know about all your great work in television, but you've also made some feature films, including those for the U.S. Hispanic audience, which is just another level. So talk a little bit about how do you develop films or TV series, if at all, for a specific market in mind? Do you have an audience in mind when you're thinking about what you want to do next?
Well, on the feature side, yeah.
Either way.
Yeah, I made 3 movies in Spanish, and naturally that discussion is always had. What's the core audience? What's the core audience? And as you said, one of them was shot in the U.S. with an entire Spanish-speaking cast, but we knew what the market was. We knew who the audience was and what they liked, and there was a lot of discussions about, what we're going to do. But I was also, as an American who speaks Spanish, because my parents are Cuban, but I was born in New York, so I'm an American. So for me, my approach was I want to make an American movie in Spanish. And so all 3 of my Spanish language movies, I consider them to be American movies in Spanish. So, which was an interesting, from a process standpoint, it was an interesting shoot on all 3 movies, because there was, for instance, a lot of humor in the films. And so American humor is very different than humor in Mexico or humor in Spain or Colombia or even in the UK. And so there's a rhythm and cadence to jokes. And so there were often times that I would set something up and I'm like, oh my God, it's hysterical. And the actors in Spanish would just wouldn't understand what it was. It was like they wouldn't understand. And it was a lot of like, you got to trust me, it's going to be great, it's going to get a laugh. And it got a laugh everywhere. Because whether it's a show from the UK or from Spain, if a joke works, there's some things that are specific and they're colloquial, but if you can, because I also wrote on 2 Spanish language TV shows, and what I discovered is, and it's harder, but if you sort of think of humor on a sort of universal or broad scale, then it can appeal to a wider audience. The audience that it's specifically being made for won't feel ripped off because they're going to feel like it's a movie for them. But then if you look at it with sort of more broader appeal, then it'll appeal to a bigger audience. So for us, it was, let's do the thing for the audience. Let's do the movie for the audience. When it was a movie called Ladron, which came out several years ago. And then we did a sequel, and then I did another movie in the DR as well that was a romantic comedy. But it was a constant conversation about what's funny. And there was one of the 3 movies that I did in the Dominican Republic. The producer of the movie definitely had a very specific sort of sense of humor. And so it was, the Dominican humor is very funny, but then there's times that it's too specific. And I would say, we can have this joke, but if we do this joke, then we're just going to lose a majority of the audience, in particular in Mexico. Because what you want when you're doing a movie in Spanish, at least with the movie that we're making, was it had to appeal to an audience in Mexico, That was the number one audience for it, right? That was the core. So it wasn't even about it had to appeal to a Cuban audience because that's even more, small. So for me, I was always thinking about what's that audience, what's the Mexican audience going to do, and then I would go to what's the international audience going to do. So it was a constant push for there's a line that you can walk because sometimes like you could tell a very specific joke about a specific culture, and then weirdly it has broad appeal because everybody can see themselves in it. And you can say, oh, that's really interesting that Dominicans do that because so do Cubans and so do Mexicans and so do Americans. But then there's jokes that are just, it's like a colloquialism or it's some whatever. And you're like, I have no idea what that means. And so those are the ones that I was constantly trying to lift out and say, like, if you do that, two people are going to laugh. And then everyone else is going to be like, it's inside baseball. No one understands. No one's going to get it. So that was from a process standpoint, it was a constant challenge. And ultimately, as a director, I had to, there were times that I was just like, just trust me, it's going to work. It's going to work. And if it didn't work, then it's pie in my face. But at some point when you're directing the film, you just have to, it's like, there's a bit of, trust me, it's going to work because you could have a discussion of 20 minutes, 30 minutes on set about a joke and just tick tock when you're trying to shoot a scene, and then, there's the old like, well, let's just shoot it both ways, which doesn't work all the time. Because ultimately, some actors know like, well, we're just going to shoot it my way, but I know you're going to use your way. And so it becomes those become the arguments. But going back to what both these guys are saying that I found really, really interesting is they're talking about the market, they're talking about movies and talking about these things, which is amazing to me. But I like to go backwards one step sort of prior to when these things became things that you were setting up, is who are these people that brought the story? Mm. So ultimately, because I know that there's producers and there's filmmakers out here, it's what is it that we're writing and creating that will appeal to a market, that will appeal to a producer and say, I see something like Peter Pan is an obvious, obviously you go like, oh my God, I come to do what like as soon as you were talking about that, I was like, oh my God, it's Peter Pan. Like I knew where you were going. Like, how do we come up with our own Peter Pan so that when you hear a pitch or you hear a pitch, right, you go, that's amazing. That's it's what they call high concept. Where it's the moment you hear it, what I like to say is it's an elevator pitch. Right. You get in an elevator with someone and, you hit and you're going up to the top floor and you got from the ground level to the top floor and you're next to a producer and you've got that ride. Yeah, it's your movie. Yeah. And if you can't do it, then it's probably not a commercial movie. It's probably not something that's going to work. It should be something that you can very quickly, a kid, goes back in time, he ruins his parents from getting together. Now he has to get them back together or else he doesn't exist ever. That's Back to the Future. Right. Right. That's a quick pitch that you go, oh, I get that. I'm like, oh, is it so? To me, I'm interested in the filmmaker that was making the others. Like, why did he become appealing to you? And it's because he had a body of work that appealed to Tom Cruise. Right. The same thing with, J.M. Barrie. Who J.M. Barrie is, and the moment you hear Peter Pan, it's just. So to me, I as opposed to these two guys, like I'm always interested in what is it that sparked you guys. And it was a filmmaker. It was an idea. It was a nugget of something that got the imagination, got the gears turning in your head. And for me, that's the secret sauce. Like, how do we do that? And I think that as creators, and I'm sure there's creators in this room. I know there's a couple that I know. What is that's sort of the trick, isn't it? What's the for instance, when we did the first Ladron, Ladron. The idea became, briefly, it was Lionsgate. At the time, they said, we're importing all these Spanish language movies from all over the world. We're in particular from Mexico and from Spain and Latin America. And they said, well, why aren't we making homegrown movies in Spanish here in the U.S.? Why is nobody doing that? And historically, in the early days of Hollywood, they were doing that. And one of the most famous cases of it was Dracula. When they made the Bela Lugosi version of Dracula, they shot that, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And at 7 p.m., the American crew left. And on the exact same sets, a Spanish language crew came in and shot a Spanish language version of Dracula. And it's actually on the DVD. If you go to the Universal DVD, you can see it. And some people argue that the Spanish language version is better than the Bela Lugosi version. But what happened was they weren't taking into account, as Gustavo said, people's languages. So they had an Argentinian playing a Mexican's mother or whatever, and it just didn't work in the Spanish language part, so they just stopped doing it. So then fast forward to the early aughts, and so Lionsgate is asking these questions, and so they went out and they looked for filmmakers that can speak Spanish, that can read Spanish, that can write in Spanish, but that were American, And so I was on a short list at the time. Like now there's more filmmakers that have popped up, but at the time I was on a sort of a short list of people that can sort of work in both worlds. And I pitched, so the idea of an elevator pitch of how this works to sell something is, it had seen a very small independent film that I had made, and I had already been doing some television. So I came in there and I had, 20 minutes, to pitch, or, it's because I know there's going to be some people that are going to be pitching here later on. I think you guys have 10-minute pitches. 10 minutes is a perfect amount of time. Like, it seems like it's not, but if you can't get your idea out in 10 minutes, then the idea is it's not commercial. Like so I sat down and I knew I had my window, like I knew typically in these meetings run about 30 to 40 minutes. Like your actual pitching time is about 10 minutes. I sat down and there, small talk. And then, so what's the idea? And the idea, all I said was, well, it's a poor man's Ocean's 11. It's a heist that's pulled off by the people that are ignored by society. The valet, the gardener, the maid, people that you flip your keys to that have access to highly secure places. They get together and they pull off a heist against this really nefarious bad guy. That was it. And that was the pitch. And in the room, in that moment, I saw the guy perk up and was like, that's a great idea. And the moment that you know that it's a great idea is when they start asking questions and they start the pitch. Now these guys are like, wait a minute, oh, and the guy, this is great, and I know. And that was it. We're off to the races. And I walked out of that room, and it's funny because I didn't write that script, but it was a script from a writer friend of mine. And I was going in, and I came in there, with like 3 of my own pitches. And I was not confident about any of my pitches. And in the lobby at Lionsgate, I called up my buddy who ended up writing the script, and I was like, I think all my ideas suck. What do you got? And he told me, yeah, all right, poor man's Ocean's 11, it's a thing. And I'm like, all right. I was like, I started talking, and I was like, I'm going to do the poor man's Ocean's 11. And I all the pitch docs and all the pitches that I had prepared, I threw them out, and I just said that one. And wow, I walked out of the room, and we're going to do the movie. Like, I'm not kidding. And then so I called up, and guess what? You're writing a movie. But it starts. I think it starts on the creator level that will get the gears turning, so that then you get, these two guys as collaborators that will then help filmmakers make the movies happen. And I think it starts at that's the germ of the idea.
Yeah, which is different than a lot of other industries. We talk so much about business and numbers and how to make things work. But what's interesting here is that, like you said, it always starts with this creative idea, this thing that's, you can't really touch it or see it. And then it's the producer's job to turn it into a something. So I think that's a great point. I do want to leave about 5 minutes for Q&A, but I did want to know, Stewart, those last 2 examples you had mentioned to us at the beginning. I love the Peter Pan. I think that's brilliant. So what were those last 2 little nuggets, and then we'll turn it over to the audience.
Okay. What I wanted to do was to show, a number of things. That the industry itself is changed. We all know it. I think it's always changed. Because there's some people, they think, oh, this is terrible. And other people think it opens up all sorts of opportunities. And so I'm on that side of it. I think it opens up opportunities. But the opportunities have to be kind of tied down. You have to understand them. And people are coming into the industry. What they know? How would you know it? You're a road guy. You've been through this stage where you went to pitch something and somebody gave you the money, you made it. Don't worry about budget. And now it's much more, you've got to be a financial wizard for all this stuff together. So the change, I see as my job, relating it to what you're saying about the idea. I enjoyed the process of having that moment really, because I did. How the hell am I going to do this? Confident it will make a great something for the global release. The pilot was shot, and as we were shooting it, we were put together a room, in total, we've 42 writers on this show and 7 showrunners. Just an enormous budget. So that was the second. Now, how that was put together, I wanted to just to illustrate the complexity of the business, the talent that goes into it, the different ways in which you could interpret a classic novel. But what was at the heart of it was the story of, we'd reached a point in my life where the world was quite a precarious situation where people were thinking, what if Donald Trump comes to power? What if Putin presses the button and we have a nuclear war? It taps into there's moments in history, it seems to me, when the world is concerned about some things and less about others. So this story, whether it was in Universal or the BBC or people who were then running Amazon, everyone understood what we were making. The writers understood it, the financiers understood it, huge amounts of money were involved. People were being thrown under a bus because they didn't quite fit the book. So that was the second project. The third project was a call. I was working with a Scandinavian group of broadcaster that were NRK's broadcaster. Their financial model is really interesting because their audiences are small, but as a domestic broadcaster, they want to make their own stuff. But 99% of it is bought from America or from Germany or Britain and so on, and dubbed or subtitled, principally dubbed and subtitled. So each year they will do a 10-poem series, and they asked me if I would work to develop this group of writers. They'd never had a room before, but people here know of writers. So we developed this story. It was a 6-part series. But we didn't have enough money. Even we had 7 countries putting their money together, making this show. I had to get, it was a prominent distributor was put in, what we call, they would do some pre-sales. That built, we had some private capital and some subsidy, which I want to relate this to Henry Miami. I just want to bring
the bridge to the Miami, yeah.
Always, except the Amazon show, which was just, we can wholly finance a platform. And they're a retailer who's drawing in subscribers by offering movies and series. Whereas the cinema, the studio, the Universals and the different companies that build their business on cinema or exploitation of movies, completely different business.
Right.
Or a broadcaster. Entirely, the money works in a different way, the returns work in a different way. These are different standalone businesses in which the producer is looking to place a story here or here or here. And if you placed it here, you have all the money from that. Placed it in a Scandinavian country, you're combining monies. Now, what people are now doing, and it's not, this to me has moved to industrial control. What important by the industry, what the Chinese are doing, what the Europeans are doing, is that realizing that the interconnection of our world is that we take the iPhone is being made in China. It's the best example. And the Apple is withdrawing that to have it made in other countries because we're vulnerable to someone falling out in the computer or someone falling out a niche. And suddenly we don't have this tool that's absolutely essential to our lives. It's become essential to our lives. Television is very, very similar because as the platforms have reached the globe, what happens to domestic television? Stories that come from culture. And so what is happening is to hold on to these industries. These people are looking to subsidize. So just like the steel industry around the world, everyone's freeing billions to keep retain their own industry, their own heavy industry. What is happening in Europe is I can go to different countries in Europe and develop a show in which I will get, in Spain now, it's around 50 or 60% of your budget will be paid by government. So if your budget is 10 million, we get 5 million for 6 million. In order to hold on to this industry, employment, training people, many people want to get into the industry. This is a battle that's been on. So go to the other side of the table and you're a producer or this group of people wanting to make films. You have to understand that and you have to work within that system. So if someone says to me, not to make a single film, I go through the tick box, that's it. If I go through a major returning series, I don't take it to BBC, But I might develop it. You see, I know about finding Netflix or Apple to fund it. And if this third season, if I want to make something in Europe, yes, in Spain, then I have to work with to give a subsidy, retain rights, and sell the show into the world. If I make something for Netflix or Amazon, they take all world rights. So they own that show. So you, as a producer, you're trying to run a business. You have to survive on fees rather than a return. So you build this machine. It makes money for, I mean, a film, for example, with Dustin Hoffman, I can say this publicly. He's in prison. I worked with this with Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein in 6 months distributed this film and it was made for around £8 million. It's £65 billion of profit. No one got a penny. Now, that film is still out there making money. I've seen it twice now on television in the UK. And these are really big business in which on various ways that who owns the rights, who recoups not just the cinema, but the licensee to the cinema. Wow. So I did the breakup of this industry, the way in which, and I'm excited for that, but you have, as an independent coming into that business, you have to understand it. You really have to understand where you position your show in the middle of this maelstrom, where you start, maybe not where you finish. You may start deliberately to end up in the industry.
Well, Stewart, I'm going to tell you that we have to have a sequel to this panel. I think The Art of the Deal, which we've done previous years. But I just want to give a round of applause to our amazing Producers Forum. And so if you are part of the first group of Spain meetings, that, Joe Garcia, correct me if I'm wrong, will be happening in this room, correct?
This room and right outside as well.
Right outside. Okay, great. So we are on break now officially, unless you haven't a meeting, and then we're going to kick it up back at 12 noon for a really, you talked about incentives, amazing incentive and training program that we're going to be announcing with our partners at Miami-Dade College, their Magic School of Animation and Gaming. So that's going to be really exciting. That'll be right back in this room precisely at 12 noon. So good luck with your pitches. We got a lot of great advice from the producers here. So let's make it happen. Thanks, everybody.